When it comes to hijacking large vessels, no one does it better than Somali pirates. But only a few of you know Somali pirates have another secret power: kidnapping tourists. In their prime a few years back, Somali pirates held over 700 hostages and 38 vessels at the same time. If they want a ship, then they'll target the largest one. But if they want a valuable hostage they can get a high ransom for, then they'll target small private boats because they know its passengers are usually people with the best passports in the world.
While I was there, I thought it would be a perfectly good idea for a special forces team to come and get me, especially after I was there for 2 years. I mean, I simply had no other sense of hope.
Without further ado, let's take a look at 8 stories of people who were kidnapped by Somali pirates. Some of them got freed after a couple of days, some were in captivity for years, but worst of all was the hostage, who was responsible for the death of almost 30 people. Number 1. British couple held by Somali pirates. In October 2009, Paul and Rachel Chandler set a sail from the smallest country in Africa, called Seychelles, to Tanzania. Less than halfway into the trip, their small sailing yacht was attacked and boarded by Somali pirates, which marked the beginning of captivity that lasted over a year. Paul and Rachel were forced to sail toward the Somali coast, where they abandoned their boat and were taken ashore. Levels of trauma and depression in the first days of their captivity were unbearable, Rachel stated, and the fact that she was separated from her husband just made things worse. Paul was trying his best to get in contact with British government and ask them for help, and on the other hand, Somali pirates were demanding millions of dollars for the lives of the British couple, which they didn't have. The British government stood by its policy of refusing to pay, but luckily, after seeing the video of helpless Paul talking about how kidnappers were losing patience, couple's friends and family managed to scrape the money and pay a private ransom to get Chandler's freed and flown out to Kenya. 2 of them managed to find a way to forget about what happened and continue to enjoy their lives. They even went that far to write a book about their kidnapping story in a specific manner. Both of them wrote parts of the book separately, writing them like a diary, telling their own stories. And only then did they realize what they went through. Despite all that, Rachel managed to go through 388 days of captivity without a single nightmare, thanks to resilience she built up as a cruising sailor. And best of all, this terrifying event didn't put an end to the couple's hobby. Paul stated he's rebuilding his yacht and preparing to set sail again, this time definitely avoiding the Somali coast. Number 2. Michael Scott Moore. In September of 2014, one of the most terrifying stories about Somali pirate kidnappings surrounded the whole internet. The story begins 2 years and 8 months earlier, when American-German journalist Michael Scott Moore was kidnapped in Galkayo, Somalia, while researching a book about piracy. Terrified that U.S. Navy SEALs would try to rescue him, his Somali kidnappers moved him to a different location every few weeks. He spent most time on the land, in safe houses similar to prisons along with the other hostages. But when pirates thought the land's not safe anymore, they moved Michael to the 160-feet-long fishing boat, which he tried to escape by jumping over the side at night. Despite the fact that Michael is a surfer who paid attention to currents and made a detailed escape plan, that didn't go as he planned. He hoped the pirates would leave him behind in the water because the boat's engine wasn't in the greatest condition and pirates would have a hard time turning it around and catching him. It's rare to see a smart Somali pirate, but the one who was the captain of this fishing boat definitely was a smart guy. He cut the engine and let the boat slowly drift towards Michael. As this big ship was getting closer to Michael, he realized he had no chance of escaping, and even if he did, his chances of surviving afterwards were flat zero. So his only option was to climb back onto the boat after experiencing a tiny bit of freedom and fall again into the hands of kidnappers. After 5 months spent on the ship, pirates decided to move Michael into one of the safe houses. A month or 2 later, Michael realized he'll be there for a long time, so he asked for a yoga mat. At first, he was unsure about this idea because he thought the pirates would make fun of him, which may start a fight. But in reality, pirates started doing yoga with Michael, and after some time, he built up enough courage to even correct their postures. But that positivity didn't last long, because soon suicide thoughts started banging on the doors of Michael's mind. His father took his own life by shooting himself, and with weapons sitting around him at all times, Michael questioned himself if he should take the same steps as his father. He also thought about taking one of the guns and trying to escape, but he was smart enough to realize he'd either get killed right away or mid-escape, which is just not worth it. While all of this was going on in Michael's brain, the pirates were demanding a $20 million ransom. A year later, Michael was released in September of 2014, and he stated that it all happened very suddenly. He didn't know what was going on, and he couldn't believe he was about to become a free man once again. It turned out that Michael's mother gathered $1.6 million with the help of family and negotiated the ransom down to that amount. One day, all of a sudden a car arrived in front of the safe house, which was very unusual. One of the pirates who spoke English approached Michael and told him that they're going to take him to the airport. He obviously didn't believe him, but he still packed his things, only to be told once he got into the car that they're not actually taking him to the airport, but the bush, where they'll hand him to another group. Michael immediately got angry and scared, thinking they had sold him to another gang. But there was something that was still giving Michael a tiny bit of hope. Instead of being around a bunch of armed Somali pirates, he was with a couple guys who were translators and negotiators. And as soon as he heard one of them saying, "Michael, you're going to the airport and your pilot's name is going to be Derek," he realized he's finally a free man after 2 years and 8 months spent in captivity. Interesting thing that happened just after Michael's plane took off is a big gunfight that happened among the pirates because they couldn't find a way to fairly share the $1.6 million ransom they just received. Number 3. Captain Richard Phillips. The story of Captain Richard Phillips is arguably the world's most known story about the kidnapping taking place in Somalia, thanks to the movie called Captain Phillips. On April 8, 2009, 4 Somali pirates attacked and hijacked the Maersk Alabama cargo ship. At the moment, there were 20 crew members on the ship who, upon seeing the pirates, locked themselves in the engine room and later successfully managed to lure one of the pirates down there, stab him in the hand, and tie him up. This sounds like a good move, but it was actually the key mistake that led to Captain Phillips' kidnapping. Seeing they've attacked the wrong ship, pirates decided to leave in a lifeboat, but first wanted to exchange their comrade for a Captain Phillips. 3 of them got into the lifeboat along with Captain Phillips, who was just trying to explain to them how to drive the lifeboat so they could get off the ship as fast as possible. However, after Richard's crewmates let the captured pirate enter the lifeboat, Somali pirates closed the doors and launched the lifeboat off the ship, taking Captain Phillips with them. The next day, USS Bainbridge Navy located the lifeboat, and one of the pirates left 3 others to go and negotiate with the Navy. But nothing was really done until 3 days later. On April 12th, Bainbridge Captain Commander Frank Castellano concluded that Phillips' life was in immediate danger based on reports that a pirate was pointing an AK-47 at his back. Castellano immediately ordered the Sniper SEAL team to get in the position and open fire, which resulted in successfully killing 3 remaining pirates on the lifeboat and successfully rescuing Captain Richard Phillips. Only one of the pirates survived, the one who left to negotiate with the Navy, but at the cost of getting sentenced to 33 years in federal prison. After Captain Phillips was freed, he wrote a book in spring of 2010, and exactly 1 year later, it was announced that Tom Hanks took an opportunity to be the main role in the movie based on Phillips' book. Number 4. Prav Diani. In the morning of the 11th of April 2010, MV Rake Africana cargo vessel was sailing from Seychelles to Zanzibar when a group of Somali pirates hijacked the ship. A 22-year-old Prav Diani was one of the ship's crewmates who witnessed his freedom being taken away. On that day, the ship was drifting on the open sea because of an engine problem. While its crew members were trying to fix the issue, a boat full of armed Somali pirates rapidly approached the ship, and before the ship crew could call for help, pirates boarded the ship. They threatened the crew at gunpoint, ordering them to repair the engine quickly and sail to Somalia. Prav Diani stated that upon reaching Somalia, they anchored the ship, and the group of Somali pirates then evaluated the ship, cargo, and crew so they could decide on ransom amount. Once that was done, a translator who is the pirate chief negotiator called the ship company and began negotiating. Prav said that the whole ship was shocked, slowly realizing what they'll have to go through. Although life was difficult with poor food, limited water, electricity, and lack of medical care in the camp of captivity, their captain encouraged them to remain positive. He even divided responsibilities amongst themselves, such as fetching water and helping with the cooking. They've managed to live an almost normal life while being heavily guarded by armed guards working on 12-hour shifts. Even though it often seems they're not, you'd be surprised if I told you how smart these pirates actually are. From day one, they studied the behavior of individual crew members and tried different strategies to divide the crew, whether by using religion or by promising a cut out of the ransom money. Pirates wanted to get certain information they would later use if negotiations slowed down. Unfortunately, the crew captain suffered 2 strokes while in captivity, while their cook died just 4 days before the ransom was paid. After a long wait of 11 months, negotiations for the ransom finally came to a close, and on the 8th of March 2011, around 50 pirates came on board and said that the crew will be going home that day. The ransom was dropped in the water near the ship from a plane. Pirates then counted and distributed the money among themselves and just left, leaving the crew confused. Crew was left with no fuel or supplies, and even if they had any fuel, they wouldn't get far because the ship was taking in water in one of the hatches. Luckily, a Navy shortly rescued the crew and flew them back to their homes exactly 332 days after captivity. Number 5. Jessica Buchanan and Paul Hagen. Jessica Buchanan was an aid worker in northern Somalia, helping to raise awareness about how to avoid landmines. The north was the relatively safe section of the country, but in October of 2011, she traveled to the more dangerous southern region for training. The night before she left, she texted her husband, Eric Landermalm, who was also an aid worker in Somalia, asking him, "If I get kidnapped on this trip, will you come and get me?" It's like she knew that tomorrow morning on her way back to the northern Somali, Jessica would get kidnapped along with her colleague Paul Hagen by the group of armed Somali pirates. I was surrounded by up to 30 men armed with machine guns and AK-47s pointed at me. I didn't know if I would be shot, raped, sold, or set free at any moment, Jessica said. Being an aid worker, she knew that if she survives the first 48 hours, she has high chances of surviving the rest of captivity, so she did everything pirates told her to do. The first night was the most stressful because pirates marched her into the desert, and Jessica thought she's about to get executed. She quickly found out that marching orders were so pirates could sleep, and at that point, pirates simply had no intention of killing her as they demanded $45 million in ransom. Worst thing was that Jessica had a thyroid condition and was developing a kidney infection, but the kidnappers provided no medicine. They forced her and her colleague to sleep on mats in the open desert for 93 days, until U.S. Special Operations Forces Navy's SEAL Team 6, famous for killing Osama bin Laden, came to the rescue. It was morning of January 25, 2012. Sun didn't even rise yet when 24 Navy SEALs parachuted from a helicopter 12 miles north of the Somali town of Adado Galgudud, where pirates were holding Jessica and Paul. SEALs then traveled by foot from their drop zone to captivity camp. At the same time, Jessica just got back from the toilet, laid down to continue sleeping, not knowing she won't get any more sleep that night. Upon reaching the captivity camp, SEALs immediately opened fire, killing all 9 pirates in seconds. When she heard gunshots, Jessica thought she's being re-kidnapped by another group of pirates, but the next moment, someone pulled a blanket off her face and called her name. It was that moment when Jessica realized she's finally going to taste freedom again after 93 days. Jessica gave her first interview about her kidnapping story with 60 Minutes in May 2013. Amongst her first thoughts when kidnapped were that it was too soon to die without having children and saying goodbye to her loved ones. Luckily, Jessica and her husband are reunited now and have a son and daughter. The biggest shock to Jessica wasn't when she realized she's being kidnapped, but when she found out that the man responsible for protecting Jessica and Poole had sold them out to land pirates. Number 6. 8 Red Cross workers. On April 15, 1998, 8 aid workers and 2 pilots were kidnapped by the group of Somali pirates immediately after they landed at an airstrip in North Mogadishu. Spokesman Gosue Anselmo said he had no information about where aid workers could be located, but one man following the situation said the hostages had been seen on a road in the Mogadishu area 3 hours after the kidnapping. The biggest irony was that while pirates were threatening to kill all 10 hostages if a ransom of $100,000 wasn't paid in the next 24 hours, the Red Cross organization sent the hostages some clothes, games, and magazines just so they have something to do while in captivity. Luckily, the captivity didn't last long. After 9 days, on April 24th, the ransom of $100,000 was paid and all 10 hostages were freed. Number 7. Captain Javed Salem and his crew. In the early morning of November 26, 2010, the container ship MV Albedo was hijacked by Somali pirates 1,500 kilometers off the coast of Somalia. At the moment of hijacking, there were 23 crew members from Bangladesh, India, Iran, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka on the ship. Captain Javed Salem, overpowered by pirates, had no other option but to surrender, which was the beginning of a 20-month-long captivity. MV Albedo quickly became a mothership for other attacks, and hostages had to watch it all while being tortured on a daily basis. Pirates used to whip them, hang them by their feet, beat them up, and do all sorts of various things. As the owner of the boat didn't want to pay a ransom of $2.85 million, pirates got really angry, shot one of the crew members, and put his body into the freezer. When families of other crew members heard this, fearing they would lose their loved ones, they started collecting ransom money. Families of Pakistani crew members were the first to collect $1.1 million and pay the ransom to free 7 Pakistani crew members. After that, things went downhill for the remaining crew members. As MV Albedo was used as a mothership for other pirate attacks, it suffered quite a lot of damage and sank. Hostages had to swim to the small lifeboat, and 4 of them lost their lives trying to get on a lifeboat. That wasn't enough since pirates really needed the money. They transported hostages to another boat, where they continued to torture them. But the worst of all was when they were moved to land, where they experienced the worst torturing. Not only did they get beaten up in all sorts of ways, but pirates also used to call their families and say how they would kill them if they didn't receive a ransom. On June 7, 2014, almost 4 years after the captivity began, Maritime Support Group, which is a civil society organization, paid a ransom and freed the remaining 11 crew members. Number 8. Denny Alex. Dennis Alex was a French spy who was kidnapped from the Mogadishu hotel back in July 2009 by armed men who were impersonating police officers. Later, it turned out those police officers were actually Somali pirates. Armed men loaded Alex and his colleague into a truck and left the hotel, but later, the truck broke down. While the truck was broken down, members of Hizbul Islam, which is a Somali Islamist police, confronted the kidnappers and demanded custody of the hostages. The 2 men were then taken away by fighters from Hizbul Islam, and later Alex was transferred to the allied militia, Al-Shabaab. The main reason why Al-Shabaab wanted to get Denny so much was because he was part of a team helping to train Somali government troops to fight Al-Shabaab. On August 25th, Dennis's colleague Aubriere managed to escape the captivity in the middle of the night while the security guards were sleeping. He then walked for 5 hours to the Somali government compound in the city, and from there was transported back to France. On the other hand, Denny wasn't that lucky. US and French technical and human intelligence teams were trying to locate him, but Al-Shabaab was constantly moving him from place to place. In December 2012, when news reached French authorities that Denis's health was deteriorating, French President François Hollande ordered the rescue mission. On the 11th of January 2013, around 2 a.m., 3.5 years after the captivity began, French special forces sneaked and assaulted an al-Shabaab position in Bulo Mara, Somalia, where Denis Alex was believed to be held. A gunfight lasting 45 minutes resulted in the death of 17 al-Shabaab fighters and 2 French soldiers. After this, French special forces abandoned the operation. 8 civilians were also reportedly killed during the operation, including a pregnant woman. This operation was a fatal mistake that ended 29 lives, including Denis. In the following days, al-Shabaab decided to execute Denis, and by doing that, avenged the lives of 17 soldiers they lost and 8 civilians. It's just crazy what Somali pirates can do. You've just seen how it looks to be kidnapped by Somali pirates. Sometimes you're the target, and sometimes you're just enjoying your vacation, sailing through the Indian Ocean, and getting kidnapped. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and click on the screen to watch the next one.